Hey guys, tonight we crawl into a freezing, echo-filled stone maze lit by dying torches and smelling faintly of cabbage and wet wool. Yep, you're spending the night in a medieval castle. Congratulations, it's already pitch black when you trudge past the gatehouse. The guards barely nod. You're not a noble, not a knight, just one more soul seeking shelter from the wolves outside. But as the gate slams shut behind you, you realize the real survival test has only begun. This place is cold, not open a window, cold. No, it's the walls are made of uninsulated stone, and the wind is screaming through arrow slits, cold. Your breath fogs in front of your face. You wrap your arms around yourself and shuffle toward the main hall. But even the central hearth barely warms the space beyond a tight ring of heat. Your bed for the night? A lumpy straw mattress tucked behind a pillar, just far enough from the fire to be nearly useless. The straw smells like goats. You plop down and instantly regret it. Something crunches. You tell yourself it was dry. That's a comforting lie. Above you, massive wooden beams groan as the upper floors settle for the night. It sounds like the roof's about to cave in. Between the creaks and the distant drip of rain down a gutter pipe, you can forget silence. And comfort? Laughable. Castles weren't designed for sleeping. They were fortresses. That meant defense, not luxury. You try to stretch out, but the draft has plans for your toes. So you curl into a tight ball, wrap your thin blanket tighter, and wonder how anyone got through a single night in this place without going absolutely bonkers. Fun fact, people in the Middle Ages didn't always sleep straight through the night. They often had first sleep and second sleep, waking up for a few hours in between to pray, tend fires, or just stew in existential dread. Historians still argue whether this was cultural habit or biological necessity in these cold, uncomfortable conditions. Meanwhile, a snore erupts nearby like a trumpet. You peek around and spot the bulky silhouette of someone else passed out by the wall. That's comforting, right? Except, now that you're listening, it's not just snoring. It's coughing. Wet, phlegmy coughing. And you're pretty sure that guy just rolled closer to your side of the room. Back to the cold. There's a small brazier in the corner glowing faintly. No one's tending it, and it doesn't radiate much heat anyway. You consider crawling toward it, but then you remember the castle dogs like to sleep near the embers too, and no one wants to get growled at by a half-feral wolfhound at 2 a.m. And the bedbugs. Oh, the bedbugs. You scratch your arm, then your leg. Could just be itchy wool. Could also be the reason castles were full of people constantly scratching themselves like background extras in a zombie movie. One quirky tidbit. Some households in colder climates would stuff their beds with dried heather instead of straw. It didn't attract as many bugs. Lucky them, you've got straw, and something that just bit you. At some point, you try lying on your back. Bad idea. The high, arched ceiling looms above you like a stone sky, and suddenly you realize it's got cracks. Big ones. Did that chunk just shift? No, it's probably fine. Probably. A small breeze whistles through the arrow slit near your feet. It's not enough to help your mood, but definitely enough to make you regret taking your boots off. Then there's the smell. Oh boy. Medieval castles have layers of scent, like a very unappealing onion. Burning tallow, unwashed bodies, the faint tang of rusting metal, and somewhere in the mix, boiled turnips. You breathe through your mouth and try not to taste it. Here's the kicker. People actually chose to live in these places. Sure, it beat starving in the woods, but at what cost? Even the nobles, wrapped in their fine furs and velvet blankets, still had to deal with the damp, the chill, the echoes of distant footsteps that never seemed to have a source. Sleep? You're lucky to get more than a few hours of light dozing, interrupted every 20 minutes by creaking wood, some servant dropping a ladle, or the aforementioned snorer hacking up a lung. And you know what's worse? You're only in the Great Hall. The nice part: servants sleep in the kitchens, soldiers curl up in barracks where the wind cuts straight through the walls. The dungeon's inhabitants, well, let's not even think about what they hear at night. You pull the blanket tighter, your eyelids droop. For half a second you forget where you are. Then a door slams somewhere, and you remember you're in a 12th century castle in the middle of winter, lying on goat-scented straw with what might be a spider nest in the corner. This is fine. Still, there's something kind of magical about it. The fire crackles low, shadows dance on the stone, and a faint, ancient melody hums through the cracks in the wall. Probably just the wind. You close your eyes again and try to dream of somewhere softer. The torches along the corridor flicker like they're nervous. You open one eye and realize you're not asleep. Not even close. The darkness in a medieval castle isn't just dark. It's the kind that presses against your face. There's no warm bedside glow, no digital clock blinking comfortingly at you. Just black. And that torch near your straw bed? It's sputtering. You really don't want to be around when it goes out. You sit up, slowly. The stone beneath your hips has gone stiff with cold, your blanket tangled around one ankle like it gave up halfway through the night. From the corner of the hall, you catch a glimmer. Moonlight threading through a high window. But mostly, you're boxed in by shadows. There's no nightlight, no helpful hallway bulb. Just your breathing, the occasional scratch of a rat somewhere. You really hope it's a rat. And the awful realization that medieval people dealt with this every single night. To get anywhere, even just to relieve yourself, we'll get to that glorious ordeal later, you'd need to carry a candle or an oil lamp. If you were rich, maybe you had a servant with a torch. If not, congratulations, you get to stumble around hoping you don't trip into a well or walk face first into a tapestry. Historians still debate whether most castle dwellers even moved much at night, or whether they simply stayed put to avoid the many, many things that could go wrong in total darkness. Honestly, you're starting to see why staying motionless might have been the safest bet. But you're restless. You stand, clutching your scratchy blanket like a very cold ghost, and wander a few feet down the corridor. The air feels thicker here, the shadows denser. You could swear something just scurried past your toes, but when you look down, nothing. And that's worse. You pass a door half cracked open, beyond it, silence, until a log shifts in a fireplace, crackling loud enough to make your heart hiccup. You freeze, then force yourself to keep moving. In castles, the fire never really dies. They're kept alive, even dimly, because relighting a fire from scratch was about as easy as starting one in a swimming pool. Some halls are pitch black, others glow faintly with the orange hum of coals. You can barely tell if someone's lying in a corner or if it's just a rolled-up cloak. Is that breathing? You retreat. Let them sleep. Or lie there quietly thinking about mortality like you are. One quirky trick some people use to combat darkness? Glowworms. No, seriously. People in rural areas, not always castles, were known to trap glowworms in jars as primitive lanterns. Didn't catch on much, for obvious reasons. Castles preferred oil lamps, rushlights, or candles. But when you're walking barefoot through a fortress filled with stone corners and homicidal cats, even a jar of bugs starts to sound appealing. Back in your hallway, the shadows seem to pulse. Every movement of the torch on the wall throws dancing shapes across the tapestries, elongated silhouettes that hint at motion where there is none. Your brain starts playing tricks. Was that a person standing at the end of the hall? Number just a suit of armor, or is it? One torch dies with a hissing sigh. Just like that, the hallway shrinks by half. You huddle into the nearest alcove, trying to let your eyes adjust again. The cold bites your fingers. You shove them into your armpits and try to feel anything but creeping dread. This place was built to intimidate, day or night. Even nobles in the upper rooms would have locked their doors against imagined assassins, thieves, or worse, their own family members. Because in castles, loyalty was often just a passing idea, a noise behind you. Maybe the wind, probably the wind. But it didn't sound like wind, more like fabric dragging over stone, or slippered feet. You don't turn around right away. Instead, you focus on the wall in front of you, its rough, damp texture lit faintly from the last flickering sconce. Eventually, you dare a glance. Nothing there. You laugh, quietly, nervously, but it breaks the tension. Sort of. Funny thing. Despite the fear, people managed to live like this, function, even thrive. Castles weren't built for ease, they were built for defense. The thick walls? Great against arrows, terrible for trapping heat or sound. That constant echo? It carries whispers farther than they're meant to go. So good luck having a private conversation, or sneaking off somewhere without being heard 3 floors up. You step over what might be a cat, or a bundle of discarded clothing. You're not touching it to find out. There's another chamber ahead. You peek in. This one's darker than the last, except for a narrow slit letting in moonlight. It illuminates the edge of a table and part of a chair. Someone's cloak hangs on the back. You feel like you've intruded. Which is absurd, because everyone else is asleep. Probably. You return to your mattress. It's cold now, colder than when you left. The fire in the hearth has collapsed into a faint red pile of coals. You lie down and pull the blanket over your head, pretending it's made of steel. You think about how people here grew up knowing this kind of night. Kids toddled across these floors. Grandmothers told stories in these alcoves. Guards stood at these very spots, watching for the glow of enemy torches beyond the outer wall. Historians aren't sure how much sleep people really got in places like this. Some argue the night was broken into distinct phases because people were simply reacting to their environment, getting up when it was too cold, when someone stirred, when a dog barked. Others think it was ritualistic, that sleep wasn't meant to be continuous, that perhaps we were never meant to fall asleep and stay that way. You're not sure what to believe, but one thing's clear. This night isn't going to end anytime soon. Your eyelids droop again. But even in the stillness, you know one thing for sure. If that armor down the hall moves, you're out of here. The snoring has become a symphony, a blend of nasal whines, sudden snores that hit like thunderclaps, and that one guy whose breathing sounds suspiciously like a goat chewing on a bagpipe. You lie flat, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks like stars. Sleep isn't happening. Not when you're surrounded by so many bodies, most of them not even in beds. You're in the Great Hall's sleeping area, and tonight you've got the full medieval experience. No walls, no real mattress, no personal space. And the air? A swirling mix of human funk and roasted onions from the evening meal. People really just lived like this. Remember, castles weren't hotels. The Great Hall was multi-use. By day, it was the bustling heart of the castle, place for eating, debating, punishing, hosting guests, making deals. By night, it transformed into a human patchwork quilt of bundled-up bodies. You shift to your side. Something crunches under you again, either straw or a beetle. Don't check. Around you are nobles' retainers, servants, maybe a few lower-ranking knights or squires, sleeping wherever they could grab a corner. And the smell? Oh, the smell is part of the ambiance. Personal hygiene wasn't, let's say it wasn't a strength of the era. One quirky truth. Some folks believed bathing too often was dangerous, letting illness seep in through the skin. So they marinated. for health. Historians still argue whether nobles really avoided baths as much as records suggest. Some think it was overstated or only applied during certain periods. Others believe nobles were just as stinky as the common folk, only dressed it up with herbs and perfumes. Tonight, your nose says the latter might be true. The guy beside you reeks of lavender and despair. Then there's the lice. Yes, lice. You scratch behind your ear automatically. Don't worry, it's probably psychosomatic. Probably. But during this time, almost everyone had them. Lice combs were a part of grooming kits, and people used ash or vinegar to try to keep the little monsters at bay. No one succeeded. You get used to the noise. Sort of. The shifting. The groans. Someone far off lets out a dream mumble, something about a pig and a cloak. You let that mystery pass. Even though you're in a castle, privacy is a myth. Curtains, if you're rich. Screens. Maybe, but only in the fanciest chambers. You've got your blanket, a foot in your ribs from a restless sleeper to the left, and someone breathing too close to your neck on the right. Ah, medieval charm. Eventually, the body heat of the room takes effect. All these people packed into stone walls do provide one mercy. It's slightly warmer. Slightly. You nestle into your straw pile, which is lumpy but less horrible now that your bones have gone numb. Still itchy, though. Suddenly there's a loud clank. You shoot upright. Everyone groans. It's just someone rolling into their gear pile. Armor stored nearby for emergencies makes a lot of noise when disturbed. Imagine someone sleeping next to a toolbox full of swords. That's basically what's happening here. You flop back down and groan along with them. But now you're alert again. Great. And now, the chamber pot situation begins. See, people didn't exactly wander down stone staircases in pitch-black hallways to use the bathroom at night. Nope. The chamber pot, the MVP of medieval nighttime routines, lived under your bed or in a corner. No privacy. No flushing. Just cold, awkward squatting in the dark, usually with the terrifying knowledge that someone else is definitely awake and judging you. You hear a squelch, followed by the unmistakable scrape of a ceramic pot. Someone's using theirs. You pray it doesn't tip. One quirky fact: urine was sometimes saved for practical use, like cleaning or fulling cloth. That means even the waste had a weird value, at least to someone with a better sense of smell than you. Of course, servants were tasked with emptying these in the morning. Sometimes, if they remembered. So you really, really hope your neighbor doesn't forget his is there when he stands up in the dark. You roll over. Your cheek meets the blanket, now infused with hall floor ambiance. You imagine yourself as a cozy medieval burrito, wrapped tightly against disease, drafts, and disgrace. Still, it beats being outside. You wonder what this would feel like in summer. More bearable, maybe. Less icy floors. But also, more sweat, more smells, more bugs. There's a distant hoot of an owl. It echoes off the stone walls in a way that makes it sound like it's inside. You remind yourself it's not. Probably. And yet for all this, they managed. People lived like this their entire lives. They raised kids in these halls, laughed by these fires, gossiped across these floor mats. This wasn't a punishment, it was life. You're just not used to it. Historians still try to reconstruct what a normal night actually felt like in a castle. Records are spotty. No one back then thought to journal about their mattress. So scholars piece things together from inventories, complaints, and a whole lot of imagination. What we do know? Sleep was communal, noisy, unsanitary, and deeply human. You hear a dog growl, not a bark, a deep, low, rumbling growl from somewhere across the room. Maybe a guard dog. Maybe a half-awake mutt dreaming of foxes. Either way, you go completely still. Dogs were part of the sleeping quarters, especially for warmth or alerting people to trouble. Unfortunately, they didn't come with off switches. The growl fades. No barking. Crisis averted. You close your eyes, and this time, you almost manage to forget where you are. The warmth of nearby bodies, the rhythm of deep breaths, the occasional cough or sniffle, it all blends into a kind of medieval white noise. It's not comfortable, not by any modern definition, but it's survivable. And somehow that's enough. You wake up to the kind of silence that feels wrong, not peaceful, empty. The snoring stopped. No footsteps, no chatter, just the slow creak of the beams above you, as if the castle itself is breathing. You crack open one eye, heart thudding, wondering if it's still night. It is, and now, you really have to go. The chamber pot, sitting nearby, glares at you with quiet menace. You've heard 3 different people use theirs already. One guy kicked his over by accident. He hasn't moved since. You don't trust yourself not to fumble in the dark, so you do the unthinkable. You rise. Your feet hit the stone. Cold shoots up your legs like punishment. You wrap your blanket tighter around your shoulders and tiptoe through a sea of sprawled limbs. One wrong step, and you're in someone's armpit. Or worse. There's a real latrine somewhere, a small mercy carved into the castle's edge or tucked into a tower. You've seen it. A wooden bench over a vertical chute that plummets several stories down. Gravity-powered hygiene. Genius. With consequences. You reach the hallway. Still quiet. You listen. A drip echoes. A rat darts past, tail twitching. You pretend it's just a weird, shadowy squirrel. Totally fine. Latrines in castles were called garderobes, and they came in varying levels of horror. Some emptied directly into the moat, others into cesspits. There were even stories of attackers sneaking up through them. Historians still debate how often that actually happened, but there's at least one account of a spy trying to climb into a stronghold through the waste chute. The result? Very messy diplomacy. You follow a dim line of torches toward the garderobe tower. The air gets colder, damper. You're close. You find the little stone cubby, the castle's sad excuse for a restroom. The door's ajar. You knock. You're not a monster. Wait a second, then push it open. Inside there's a wooden plank with a large hole. It smells like wet rock, old rot, and something worse. There's a breeze, yes, an actual breeze, from the shaft below. Not comforting, just a reminder that if you drop your blanket, it's gone forever. You hover. You regret everything. You wonder how anyone did this while wearing layers of wool, petticoats, or, heaven forbid, armor. Some people even carried small padded stools for portable relief. You? You've got one icy bench and a vague sense of shame. One quirky fact: the term garderobe literally means wardrobe, because some people used these latrine areas to hang clothes. Why? Because the ammonia-rich air helped repel lice. Yep, the castle's toilet doubled as a medieval dry cleaner. Try not to picture that next time you wear linen. The view, however, is oddly spectacular. A narrow slit in the wall reveals moonlit fog over the outer bailey. You can just make out the silhouettes of sentries patrolling the curtain wall, cloaks flapping like awkward bat wings. One yawns. You're not alone in your wakefulness. You finish your unfortunate business, grab a splintery ledge for support, and retreat. On the way back, you pass by a small alcove with a bucket and ladle, an ancient hand-washing station, or as close as you'll get. The water's freezing. You splash once and hiss like an angry cat. Good enough. Back in the hallway, a torch flares behind you. You freeze. Someone's coming. A guard rounds the corner, his metal boots clinking against the floor. He's half asleep, helmet askew, yawning like he's trying to swallow the air. He doesn't notice you. Just marches past, muttering about cold toes. Guards were the castle's midnight lifeline. They walked the ramparts, checked the gates, peeked down stairwells to make sure no one was sneaking in or sneaking around. There wasn't a formal night shift system like modern security, more like a rotation of poor souls whose turn it was to not die of frostbite. Lucky you aren't on that list. Historians still argue whether these patrols were primarily functional or symbolic. Were they really effective at stopping infiltrators, or just meant to give the illusion of safety? In a world without flashlights, CCTV, or even whistles loud enough to carry far, it's hard to say. You sneak past, back toward your pile of straw. You pause near the kitchens. You shouldn't. But you do. The stone door is slightly open, and a whisper of warm air leaks through. Kitchens and castles often kept fires going through the night, either for bread starters, stews, or simply because restarting a fire took real work. You tiptoe in. It smells like yeast, old wood, and faintly of stew. The hearth's coals glow like dragon eyes. You spot a hanging ladle and consider a quick sip. Just one. You dip the ladle into the pot and take a cautious taste. It's still warm. It tastes like watery cabbage and onion sadness. But somehow it comforts you. It tastes like people surviving. A clatter behind you. You turn fast, splash a little stew on your blanket. It's just a kitchen dog, rooting in a corner. You both freeze, then resume your business like two strangers pretending they didn't just lock eyes while doing something mildly illegal. Back in the Great Hall, the snores have returned. You find your pile, lay down, and wrap yourself up again. This time, the smell isn't as bad. Your body heat makes a little cocoon. And that stew is doing mysterious things to your insides. You feel marginally better. Before sleep takes you again, you think about what it means to live like this. To eat mystery stew at midnight. To use a toilet that hangs over open air. To trust that the guy sleeping next to your feet doesn't roll over and drool on you. Somehow, people managed. Tomorrow will be different. Brighter. Busier. But tonight? Tonight you made it to the garderobe and back. Congratulations, medieval champion. That's called progress. You drift back into sleep, but it's not the gentle, peaceful kind. It's the kind where every creak of wood and rustle of cloth startles you just enough to hover on the edge of consciousness. And now something's changed again. It's cold, colder than before. Your blanket is still wrapped tight. You haven't moved, but the air has shifted, damp and sharp like it rolled in off a frozen bog. You crack one eye open. And there it is. Fog curling just above the floor, thin tendrils catching the low firelight like breath on glass. Stone walls hold in a surprising amount of chill when the wind picks up outside. Castles were built to be defensible, not cozy. Insulation? Never heard of her. So while the thick walls are great at keeping out arrows and rebellious villagers, they're also excellent at keeping in every last drop of cold. You tuck your hands inside your tunic sleeves and wonder how anyone functioned like this. You're sleeping in all your clothes, plus a wool blanket, and you still feel like an overcooked popsicle. Now, let's talk heating, or lack thereof. Most castles had one main heat source, the Great Hall's central hearth. And that hearth had a big job: heat the room, cook the food, dry wet cloaks, light up the gloom, scare off rats, you name it. But once the fire died down at night, that was it. No embers, no flickering glow, just you and the deep, biting dark. Upper floors, where the lord and lady slept, sometimes had their own fireplaces. Lucky them. But you? You're on the straw level, cuddled up to 40 snoring strangers, breathing in their shared steam and wondering if your nose will fall off by morning. One quirky trick people used to stay warm? Sleeping with animals, literally. Chickens under blankets, dogs at their feet. the occasional goat curled up beside a fire. It sounds weird, until you remember there's no thermostat. A chicken's body heat suddenly seems like a gift from heaven. You feel movement nearby. A dog, snuffling in its sleep, stretches out one muddy paw across your shin. You freeze, then slowly let it be. It's warm. It's snoring softly. And unless it pees on you, you've just made the best possible roommate in the castle. Historians still argue whether castle floors were heated with anything more advanced than fires. Some suggest that hot stones might have been used, heated in flames and wrapped in cloth to act like primitive water bottles. Others say there's little evidence to support that idea in most regions. Either way, your current stone mattress is absolutely not warmed by anything except human misery. You take a deep breath. Bad idea. The foggy chill goes straight up your nose and punches your brain like a tiny frost dragon. You curl up tighter, trying to preserve whatever heat you have left. Around the room, you see figures doing the same. Some are wrapped entirely in cloaks or blankets, like woolly cocoons. Others lie flat, resigned to the cold, like corpses preparing for judgment. You see one person near the fire, propped up against the wall, eyes open and glassy, possibly asleep, possibly hallucinating. Then the wind howls. You flinch. It's not a wolf. It's just air through narrow arrow slits. These windows weren't built for the weather. They were designed for murder. So yes, while they allow guards to shoot out, they also let in wind, sleet, snow, and the occasional bat. That sound, the whistle of wind dragging through those stone openings, is as constant as your heartbeat tonight. You pull the blanket over your head. It helps a little. It also smells like feet. Not your feet. Some castles did have wall tapestries, not just for decoration, but for insulation. Heavy cloth hung over stone kept out some of the drafts and made the room feel less like a dungeon and more like a gloomy, oversized closet. You glance around. This place has a few tapestries, but they're way up near the Lord's space. Down here, you've got bare walls and raw regret. One strange belief from the time, that drafts could carry illness, especially through the bones. People blamed night air for everything from fevers to madness. It sounds silly now, but considering how damp and cold it gets in here, you kind of get it. Breathing this air does feel like a health risk. You try to imagine what it would take to make this place feel warm. More firewood? Risky. Wood was precious and not always easy to get in bulk. More blankets? Expensive and not exactly mass-produced? More bodies? Honestly, you're at capacity already. But somehow they endured. They adapted. Kids grew up in these conditions. Old people lived to 50 or even 60. Night after night, century after century, people bundled up and faced this same cold, same damp, same darkness, and lived through it. You hear footsteps again. This time soft. Barefoot. A servant girl tiptoes past, heading toward the fire. She tosses on a small log and crouches beside the dying coals. You watch her cup her hands near the heat, then hold them to her face like it's a sacred moment. You get it. She doesn't see you. Or if she does, she doesn't care. She adds one more log, just enough to coax out a reluctant flame, and slips away again. She's probably not supposed to use that wood. But she did. And now the fire crackles faintly, spreading the tiniest bit of warmth through the cold sea of sleepers. You adjust your blanket. A little warmth reaches your toes. The dog sighs in its sleep, puffing hot air against your leg. You're still freezing, but a little less than before. Sleep creeps up on you again. Not out of comfort, but exhaustion. You let it. Because in this castle, on this night, that's the only way you survive. Slowly, one breath at a time, curled against the dark. You don't wake up so much as gradually become aware that morning has begun. not because the sun is streaming in through windows or birds are chirping sweetly, but because someone just stepped on your hand. They mutter a half-hearted, "Sorry," and keep moving. You groan, roll over, and realize your hip is now fused to the floor. Congratulations, you've survived a full medieval castle night. Barely. The Great Hall is waking. People are stirring, stretching, and blinking like owls dragged out of a cave. Blankets are being folded, chamber pots carried carefully toward side doors, and boots relaced with the grim focus of sleep-deprived survivors. It's loud in here. Not shouting, just layers of sound. Coughs, low voices, crackling wood, footsteps on stone. The kind of noise that tells your brain, "Hey, things are happening. Get up before someone takes your bread." And speaking of bread, you smell it. Someone in the kitchen has either started baking or is trying to reheat last night's stale loaves. Either way, the scent cuts through the fog of fatigue and lures your body into a semi-functioning state. You sit up slowly. Your back cracks. You might be 30. You feel 90. Now comes the part of castle life no one romanticizes: the morning scramble. Everyone wants food, warmth, and a slightly cleaner tunic. The servants are already moving like a tired army, hauling firewood, refilling water jugs, sweeping straw, and dodging hungover knights. And yes, even knights got hangovers, especially after feast days. There's no Advil, no coffee, and no forgiveness in these stone walls. You see one lord staggering toward the chapel with a look on his face that says, "If I die during prayers, let it be quick." Let's talk about medieval mornings. First things first, you probably didn't sleep alone. We've covered that. But now you also have to clean up your own little corner of humanity. You fold your blanket into something resembling a rectangle and stash it near a wall. The straw you slept on. Close enough to a pile. Cleanliness in this world is a relative concept. You might get to splash your face with cold water from a basin. Maybe rub your teeth with a stick dipped in salt. You might even get a dab of rosemary water if someone in the castle is feeling fancy. But more likely, you rub your hands on your tunic and call it good. Historians still argue whether hygiene was taken seriously by most people or just the upper classes. There's plenty of evidence that medieval folks did bathe when they could, used soaps made from animal fat and ash, and even scrubbed their laundry. But hot water took serious effort, and winter made everything harder. So most mornings, clean meant not visibly diseased. You shuffle toward the kitchen entrance, following your nose. Someone's already inside slapping dough onto hot stones, while another servant stirs a pot that smells suspiciously like last night's stew, reheated with extra sadness. You're handed a bowl with a ladleful of the gruel. It's beige, warm, vaguely edible. You eat it because it's there. One fun little tidbit. Ale was often drunk with breakfast, even by children. Not because people wanted to start the day drunk. Well, most didn't. But because the brewing process killed off nasty waterborne bacteria. Safer than a well, more fun than cold cabbage soup. You sip a weak ale, and it's not terrible. Room temperature and vaguely sour. But it goes down easier than the gruel. The day has officially begun. Now here's something you hadn't counted on. The castle gets busier as the sun climbs. Loud, frantic, chaotic. It's like someone hit a medieval on switch. Servants rush with trays. Pages dart back and forth carrying scrolls and boots. The steward yells something about a missing ledger. A knight complains about a loose saddle strap. Somewhere upstairs, a baby wails with the power of 1,000 banshees. And the cook is swearing at someone over a burnt oat cake. Again. You're just trying to stay out of the way. This is a time of day when the castle feels most alive, but also most hierarchical. Everyone knows their place. You're low on the ladder. Very low. You don't speak unless spoken to, and you move fast when someone higher up needs something. You see the lord of the castle striding through the main hall now, flanked by his personal guard. His boots are spotless, his cloak lined with fur, his beard so well-groomed it probably has its own squire. He doesn't look at you. He doesn't see you. Castles ran on routine and power. Everyone had a task, and even waking up followed a ritual. The bell might ring from the chapel, marking prime, the first official prayer of the day. The lord would confer with his steward. The cook would plan the meals. And peasants in the fields would already be hours into their workday. You wonder what it would be like to be lord. To sleep in an actual bed, in a room with tapestries and warmth, and maybe even a personal chamber pot that no one else touches. Tempting. Until you remember that being in charge also means people want to poison you, or overthrow you, or marry your daughter to a guy with too many swords. Still, the idea of not sleeping on straw is compelling. You finish your meal and step outside. The sun hasn't fully risen, but the sky's starting to fade from ink to iron. The air is cold, but somehow feels cleaner than what was trapped inside those stone walls all night. You stand in the outer courtyard for a moment. Watch the servants dragging buckets of water from the well. A boy leads 2 goats toward the lower stables. A woman slaps laundry against a rock near the moat, her arms red from the cold. The castle is a living machine. A cold, unpredictable, occasionally smelly machine, but one that worked, somehow. And as you watch it come to life, you realize you made it. Through the noises, the smells, the aching cold, the communal everything, you survived a medieval castle night. And now, the day begins. You don't get long to enjoy the morning air. A voice cuts through your moment of peace. A gravelly shout from one of the guards. You! We need hands on the latrines. Now. Ah, of course. Every castle had a dirty little secret. And no, it's not the political intrigue or that one noble who mysteriously fell down the stairs last winter. It's waste management. You turn and follow the call reluctantly, dragging your feet toward the back corner of the outer ward, where the smell starts before you even see anything. A few other bleary-eyed souls are already gathered, cloths tied over their mouths, buckets in hand. The guard nods at you with the grim expression of someone who's seen one too many unfortunate splashes. Welcome to the garderobe. Medieval castles didn't exactly have indoor plumbing. Some were lucky enough to have garderobes, essentially stone privies built into the walls with chutes that dumped waste down into the moat or onto the ground below. Think of them like gravity-fed poop tubes with zero privacy and even less sanitation. You climb a narrow stair to the small stone chamber, a wooden bench with a hole, a breeze that definitely shouldn't be this strong, and a stench that makes your eyes water. You've been sent not to use it. No, that would be too easy. But to help with the maintenance. Let's just say someone has to scoop the filth that doesn't quite make the exit. Sometimes the chute clogs, sometimes it splashes back. Sometimes, and this is the real horror, the wind is blowing the wrong way and everyone regrets their life choices. One fringe fact? Some castles supposedly hung herbs or old cloaks in garderobes as scent blockers, though how effective that was is, frankly, questionable. There's also this delightfully strange belief that the ammonia in the air kept out demons. Honestly, if demons made it through this, they deserve to haunt. You get to work, trying not to breathe through your nose. The bucket is heavy, and it sloshes alarmingly as you carry it back down. Outside, there's a designated waste pit. Sort of. More like the general direction everyone flings it. You dump and pray your boots survive. Historians still argue whether the average castle had an organized sewage system or just relied on brute force and suffering. Some advanced castles had cesspits with clever drainage systems. Others just relied on gravity, prayers, and the hope that no one slipped during disposal. You look up at the castle wall, spotting other garderobe holes dotting the stone like weird little mouths. You imagine someone sitting up there, minding their business, thinking about bread or taxes or how to keep their wool socks from molding, and boom, down it goes. You step away quickly. You never know when someone might drop a surprise. By now your stomach has turned in ways you didn't know possible, and you smell like medieval reality. There's no soap waiting for you. Just a quick rinse in a basin filled with freezing water and possibly a frog. And yet, this was just another part of castle life. Not glamorous, not mentioned in ballads, but crucial. Because if you don't deal with the waste, it builds up, and that's how you end up with plague. Or rats the size of terriers. Or a moat that literally steams in summer, filled with more than just rainwater. As you rub your hands on your tunic and try to mentally reset, you realize just how rough the logistics of daily life were. Castles weren't just stone fortresses. They were tiny cities, complete with plumbing problems, grumpy neighbors, and that one guy who always pretends he doesn't smell anything. You head back toward the main yard, trying to avoid eye contact with anyone who might ask you to do something worse. You pass a couple of washerwomen cackling to themselves as they stomp laundry with bare feet. They give you a look. You give them a nod. There's an understanding here. A silent camaraderie born of shared misery and wet socks. And then, because fate has no chill, the horn blows. It's a short, sharp call, nothing dramatic. But it means something. A delivery has arrived at the outer gate. You join a small crowd gathering near the drawbridge. A merchant cart rolls up, its wooden wheels grinding across the rough stones. The cart is loaded with sacks, barrels, and two very annoyed geese tied in a basket. The merchant looks cold, grumpy, and slightly terrified. He's smart, because entering a castle, even just the courtyard, is a process. Guards check his goods. A steward comes out to inspect the ledger. A noble-looking lady with a suspiciously clean cloak watches from a distance, taking mental notes. Smuggling contraband into a castle was a very real concern. Everything had to be inspected. People hid weapons in grain, messages in cloth bolts, even poisons in barrels of honey. You once heard a rumor about someone hiding a spy inside a bale of hay. Might be fiction. But in this place, who knows? The guards wave the cart through. You help unload a barrel marked salted fish. It's heavy, it leaks, and you now smell like sea ghosts. But this is another piece of the castle puzzle. Trade. Nothing here is self-sustaining. Yes, they have a garden, a few pigs, some chickens, but for spices, wine, linen, beeswax, iron nails, or even something as basic as salt, someone has to bring it in, safely, through bandit-ridden forests, flooded roads, and toll-happy barrens. You roll the barrel towards the cellar entrance, slipping once on a patch of frozen mud. The merchant's already turning his cart around, ready to head back down the road with fewer goods and hopefully all of his limbs. As the portcullis clanks closed behind him, the noise echoes through the stone. Another piece of daily castle survival completed. You look around, grime on your hands, fish juice on your boots, clothes still damp from the wastewater basin, and realize this is life here. Not the stuff of fairy tales, not all jousts and banners, just endless work, layered smells, and the occasional goose with a vendetta. And night? It's coming again. Slowly, the light's beginning to fade. You have maybe 4 hours of daylight left to finish your work, find food, and maybe, secure a warmer spot near the fire. Because winter nights in a medieval castle? They don't get easier. You just get better at surviving them. By now your legs ache from the non-stop motion, and your hands are so cold they've forgotten what warm ever felt like. The castle's rhythm never really slows, but as the afternoon wanes, there's a noticeable shift. Tasks begin wrapping up, food prep kicks into high gear, and a quiet urgency hangs in the air. Because nightfall is coming. Again. You're barely recovered from last night, and already the anxiety starts curling in your chest. Remember the cold that made your teeth ache? The constant noise? The guy who snored like a dying bagpipe? Yeah, all of that is coming back. And unless you've won some invisible lottery today, you're probably sleeping in the same miserable spot again. But you still have a few hours of daylight. And the castle has one more job for you: firewood. The phrase medieval firewood duty doesn't strike fear into modern hearts. But let's be clear. You're about to become very intimate with splinters, frostbitten fingers, and a sled that doesn't believe in steering. The castle needs fuel. For warmth. For cooking. For light. Firewood is the bloodstream of the entire structure, especially in winter. And no, it doesn't just magically appear stacked and seasoned. You trudge to the woodpile outside the outer gate, where logs are being chopped with the kind of rhythmic violence that suggests the axe wielder is working through some things. You're handed a half-broken sled and told to load it. Not with kindling, with actual weighty logs. This is the part of castle life most medieval movies skip, because it's so unglamorous. Firewood hauling is repetitive, exhausting, and crucial. No one praises you for it. But if the kitchen runs cold, or the Lord's chamber doesn't get its nightly fire, people start yelling, loudly. As you bend to lift the first log, your spine makes a noise like someone cracking a walnut. You ignore it. You have to. Historians still argue whether castles had dedicated staff for wood gathering or if it rotated among lower servants. Some records mention woodcutters on payroll. Others suggest it was a whoever lost at dice sort of job. Today, it's yours. Here's a weird detail. Not all wood was treated equally. Oak burns hot and long, perfect for winter nights. Birch lights quickly. Pine smells nice but spits sparks. In big castles, they kept different types for different uses, which makes you think someone, somewhere, had a full mental wood database and no other hobbies. You load your sled, stack after painful stack, until it groans under the weight. Then you start hauling it back toward the inner yard, slipping and cursing under your breath as the runners catch on every lump of frozen earth. Joke break. You know what they didn't have in medieval castles? Heated gloves, or back braces, or chiropractors. Just pain, snow, and the hope that nobody asks you to go back for more. The sun is lower now, casting golden slashes across the stone walls. You pass through the narrow arch into the main yard and see the kitchen staff already lighting fires. Smoke drifts upward, curling into the dusky sky. The smell of onion and fat begins to push back the day's sour air. You dump the wood where the cook points. She doesn't thank you, but her nod is something close. Inside, the great hall is already transforming. Benches are wiped down, more rushes thrown on the floor. The fireplace is being coaxed into life again. Everyone's preparing for the evening meal. It's not a feast tonight, thank goodness. Just a standard dinner. That means stew, root vegetables, maybe some boiled grain cakes if someone remembered the flour. You find your usual spot near the hearth. Not close to the fire, those spots are reserved for nobles or favored staff, but within warmth range, which is good enough. You can feel your fingers again. Kind of. One quirky detail you've noticed over the past few days? People talk more in the evenings. Something about surviving another day seems to open the floodgates. Gossip, jokes, half-true tales about ghosts in the West Tower. Someone starts carving a chunk of cheese with the same knife they use for everything. A young page quietly tunes a string instrument with 3 working strings. The noise is soft, textured, human. Dinner arrives in wooden bowls. It's stew again. You don't ask what kind. You eat it before it cools. Ale is passed around. Not much. Just enough to soften the edges of another hard day. The fire crackles, and someone begins to hum a slow song you don't recognize. It has the rhythm of walking long distances, or maybe of waiting for spring. You catch yourself yawning. Your whole body starts to sag. But before you even think about sleep, there's one last necessity: the nighttime security routine. Most people don't realize how paranoid castles were about night. With good reason. Darkness was when enemies snuck in, or fires started unnoticed, or betrayal crept up the stairs with a dagger and bad intentions. As the sky turns to deep charcoal and the last hint of sun fades, the guards swing into action. You watch as the portcullis drops, slow and loud. Chains rattle, doors are barred, torches are lit along the walls but kept low. Nightlight, medieval edition. A bell rings once from the chapel. Not a call to prayer this time, a signal. All's locked. No one in. No one out. You're technically done for the day, but one guard grabs you and gestures toward the north tower. He needs help doing a torch check. You follow him up the spiral stairs, the narrow kind that make your knees hate you and your heart doubt its own strength. At the top, the wind howls. The torch in your hand flickers violently. Below, the castle seems both peaceful and fragile, like a sleeping beast surrounded by deeper darkness. The guard checks latches, peers over the parapet, then nods. All quiet. You head back down, feet dragging. Finally, you collapse near the fire again. You wrap yourself in a musty blanket, your shoulders still cold, but your face pleasantly warm. The noise around you fades to a low murmur. A few people already snore. Someone's mumbling in their sleep. A pot clanks in the kitchen. It's happening again. Another night. The fire flickers low. Shadows stretch across the walls. You curl tighter, tuck your hands under your arms, and try not to think about the garderobe, the geese, or the aching weight of your limbs. Surviving one night in a medieval castle? That was hard. But surviving every night, that's something else entirely. It's not the cold that wakes you this time. It's the bells. Loud, frantic, and way too early, the chapel bell rings out in a panicked rhythm that everyone instantly recognizes. Trouble. You sit up so fast your head spins, and your limbs scream in protest. Around you, people scramble upright, some barefoot, some still half asleep, all looking equally alarmed. You barely have time to throw on your cloak before someone yells, "To the walls, check the gates." Ah, perfect. You're officially living through a castle emergency. It could be anything. An approaching rider, a fire, a collapsed wall, even just someone important showing up unannounced. But the mood is tense, and your half-frozen boots aren't helping. You dash toward the gatehouse, following a trail of torchlight and grumpy guards. Turns out this time, it's an intruder, not an army. Just one man, spotted too close to the outer wall, running when hailed. Which is exactly suspicious enough to ruin everyone's sleep. You join the others on the battlements, peering into the darkness. The landscape beyond the moat is shrouded in night mist, quiet and deceptively calm. A few guards light pitch torches, fat, smoky things that throw weird shadows over the courtyard, and someone sends up a flare arrow that hisses red and vanishes. You're told to keep watch and stay alert, which is rich coming from the guy who nearly nodded off mid-command. Still, adrenaline does what sleep couldn't. Your heart hammers, your eyes sting, and you grip your borrowed torch like it's going to help you wrestle a spy if needed. Historians still argue whether castles regularly experienced these minor security breaches, or if we overestimate how often random threats approached in the night. But one thing is clear. Nighttime vigilance was obsessive, with good reason. One silent ladder against the wrong wall, and boom! Hostile takeover. There's a quirky bit of castle trivia that feels relevant here. Some castles had trap stairs. Narrow, uneven, built intentionally to trip unfamiliar feet. You glance at the twisting steps behind you and suddenly wonder if you've already fallen victim to one of those. Twice. Eventually, a scout returns. Nothing found. Just a lone set of footprints veering into the woods. Still, the tension lingers. Someone mutters about spies. Another whispers about bandits. Someone else swears it was a ghost. The gates stay closed tighter than usual, and double guards are posted until dawn. You return to your spot by the fire, sleep totally shattered, adrenaline now replaced by the kind of fatigue that turns your eyelids into bricks. But sleep is elusive again. Your body's buzzing, and your mind keeps playing what-ifs. What if the figure had been more than one? What if the wall watch had missed him? What if the castle was under siege? You've heard stories. Everyone has. Siege life was the ultimate test of castle survival. Nights that stretched into weeks or months. Food dwindling. Rats becoming acceptable. Fires kept low to hide activity. You'd be stuck behind walls that start to feel more like a tomb than a fortress. And the worst part? The psychological warfare. Besieging armies didn't just hurl rocks. They hurled rotting corpses, infected animals, and taunts. One legendary tale tells of a noblewoman mooning enemy archers from the battlements to prove morale was still high. You're not there yet. But mentally, you make a note of your best mooning perch just in case. You finally drift off again in a half-doze, waking later to muted morning light. The emergency is over. For now. But the event leaves a mark. People move a little faster today. Eyes dart to shadows more often. Even the chickens seem paranoid. You're given a lighter task as a reward for your night shift, helping mend blankets and cloaks. Yes, sewing duty. You're handed a curved needle, a chunk of wool cloth, and a confusing bundle that might be a hood or might be a sock. Either way, it smells faintly of cheese. This is how you learn about another underappreciated aspect of castle survival. Textile maintenance. There's no factory down the road, no Amazon Prime. If something tears, someone here stitches it, or it stays torn. Winter makes this urgent. A ripped cloak can mean frostbite. A worn blanket means a sleepless, shivering night. And you? You're not going back to that cold floor without at least one extra layer. You sit with two older women who sew with terrifying speed and whisper all the castle gossip as they work. Apparently, the cook and the cooper are seeing each other. The steward's cousin was banished for extreme cheese theft, and one of the squires sleeps with his boots on to save time in case of attack. Honestly? Smart. One of the women hands you a patched-up mitt. You slip it on. It's warm, mismatched, slightly damp. Perfect. You spend the rest of the morning surrounded by snippets of wool and scandal. And though it's not thrilling work, it feels important. Like maybe tonight, you'll shiver just a little less. After lunch, turnip mash and something unidentifiable but salty. You're asked to accompany a guard on a walk of the inner wall. More checking, more watching. The mood hasn't lifted. Walking the wall is both beautiful and eerie. You get a sweeping view of the surrounding land, frosted fields, leafless trees, smoke curling from far-off homesteads. But up here, the wind cuts sharper. The castle looks different from above. Less cozy hearth, more stone beast ready to bare its teeth. There's a moment when you pass over the east tower and catch a glimpse of a tiny alcove built into the stone, barely wide enough for one person. Your guide grunts. Night perch, when we run short on beds. You blink. That's not a metaphor. That's an actual place people sleep. Historians still argue whether castle spaces were this tight or if later restoration has shrunk things. But with the population crammed behind these walls, knights, servants, children, animals, it makes sense. You sleep wherever you fit. You return from the wall chilled but grateful not to be spending the night up there with just a wool cloak and regret. Back in the Great Hall, evening has begun to unfurl again. Fires lit, bread baked. Some form of animal is roasting, possibly goat, possibly ambitious pigeon. The emergency feels like a story now, something distant and vague. But no one truly relaxes, because that's the quiet truth of castle nights. It's not just the cold or the discomfort, it's the fragility. The way one knock, one fire, one stranger too close to the gate can send everything spiraling. There's a rhythm here, yes, but also constant tension humming underneath, like a taut string that might snap. And yet, you're still here. Tonight you eat next to a boy who lost 3 toes last winter. He shows you his homemade wooden inserts and jokes they make him run faster. Across from you, the guard you helped last night gives a grunt that might be thanks. And above, the stars begin to blink into view again, distant and cold, but always watching. One more night. One more chance to outlast the darkness. You pull your repaired cloak tighter. The fire flickers, and you wait. The morning light creeps through narrow arrow slits, painting long, thin stripes across the cold stone floor. You blink awake to a world of chill and echo, the kind of silence that feels loud in a place made for noise. The castle is waking slowly, grudgingly, like a bear stirred too soon from hibernation. You stretch, groaning softly. The floor beneath your thin blanket still bites at your skin, and your joints creak in complaint. It's another day of hard survival ahead, but first, you have to find breakfast. Castles didn't stock up on pastries or warm croissants. Nope. You trudge to the great hall where a wooden trough holds yesterday's porridge, now turned into a lumpy, grayish mass that smells vaguely of sour oats and bad decisions. You try to mask your disgust. Starvation is a serious business, but nobody says you can't have standards. This porridge wasn't just food, it was a staple. Filling but monotonous, often made of barley or rye, sometimes sweetened with honey or dried fruit if the Lord was feeling generous. Historians still argue how often medieval peasants and servants really got to enjoy luxury ingredients. Some say it was rare, others believe daily life included more variety than we give credit for. Your mouth silently protests as you shovel a spoonful in. To your surprise, it's hot enough to burn your tongue. Well, at least something is warming you up. As you eat, you overhear talk about the morning's tasks: cleaning the chapel, repairing the moat's wooden supports, hauling water from the well, and delivering messages to the village. The usual endless to-do list. Today, you're assigned to the garderobe patrol. Pause. Yes, the garderobe. The medieval castle's charmingly named latrine system. Basically a hole in the wall that drops waste outside the keep. It's a place you try to avoid thinking about, especially at night. You head outside toward the outer wall, careful not to slip on the icy stones. The fresh morning air smells like smoke, damp earth, and, well, the unmistakable hint of old castle fertilizer. The garderobe waste didn't just disappear. It was either tossed into the moat or collected for fields outside. You spend your patrol checking that the waste chutes aren't clogged, making sure the wooden seatboards aren't rotten through, and keeping watch for rats. Yes, rats. Medieval castles were basically rat paradises. You see them everywhere, scurrying, bold, and hungry. They're the unofficial co-residents, sneaking scraps and biting ankles when no one's looking. There's even a quirky medieval belief that rats could sense poison, so their behavior sometimes gave clues about food safety. No scientific proof, but it's a fun thought. While on patrol, you spot a black rat nearly as big as your fist. It darts past you like it owns the place. You mutter a joke about rats running the castle and remember the story about a cat named Lord Whiskers, who was officially appointed chief mouser by the kitchen staff. This cat had a reputation for being a ruthless hunter and occasional royal pain. The walls echo faint voices, someone practicing prayers in the chapel nearby. The castle's religious routine never truly stopped, even during emergencies. You pause, taking in the faint scent of burning incense mixed with the raw, cold air. Historians still argue whether the chapel was a calming sanctuary or another place full of pressure and judgment. Either way, it's clear that religion was woven deeply into every corner of castle life. Your patrol wraps up with a trip to the well. Drawing water in winter is a Herculean task. The bucket is ice cold, the rope stiff with frost, and the water tastes like it's seen better days. You haul up the heavy load, careful not to drop it. Spilling water inside the walls meant slippery floors and, sometimes, punishment. You carry the water back, imagining how different things would be with a modern faucet. It's a little thing, but tonight's fire, stew, and cleaning depend on this effort. Back inside, the cook thanks you with a nod. She's already preparing a simple soup, warming the kitchen's bones. The smell makes your stomach rumble. You slip into the hum of daily work again, fetching kindling, cleaning rushes, sorting linen. Each task repetitive but essential. The castle is a living machine, and every cog must turn. As afternoon slips toward evening, a horn sounds from the gatehouse. It signals a visitor, a traveling merchant seeking shelter and trade. You watch as the gates slowly creak open, the courtyard filling with foreign scents, strange fabrics, and the clink of coin. This arrival stirs excitement. Merchants brought news, rare goods, and sometimes fresh food, making them a vital lifeline. But they also brought risk, disease, gossip, or unwanted trouble. You catch a snippet of conversation. Fresh spices from the east, rare silks, a newfangled device called a clock. You wonder what it would be like to own a clock, to know exactly when to wake or sleep instead of guessing by light or bells. The sun dips low. The castle prepares again for nightfall. You feel the familiar weight of exhaustion, the ache of frozen toes, the hum of constant vigilance. This is your life, and somehow you keep surviving it. The candlelight flickers weakly, casting long shadows across the great hall as night truly settles in. You've finished your last chore, the day's work done, but your body still buzzing from cold and exhaustion. Everyone slowly gathering for the evening meal, the same ritual repeated countless nights before. You trudge to your usual spot near the hearth, grateful for the modest warmth. Despite the fire, the air still carries a sharp bite. You pull your patched cloak tighter, wishing for anything softer or warmer. You've heard nobles sleep under furs piled like mountains. But you? You get the castle's cold stone and one thin blanket that smells faintly of mildew. Eating tonight's stew, root vegetables, some salted meat, and hard bread, you catch snippets of conversation drifting your way. Someone's talking about the latest hunting trip, another gossiping about the steward's missing silver spoon, and someone else murmurs about the upcoming feast for the Lord's birthday. A feast you won't be invited to, but you listen anyway. It's the closest you get to a luxury. You remember a quirky fact you learned recently. Some castles had night kitchens, tiny, secret spaces where leftover food was kept warm or reheated for servants who worked the late shifts. No one talks about them much, but they're little sanctuaries of comfort amid the harshness. After dinner, the great hall begins to empty. Servants shuffle away to their cramped quarters, nobles retire to their private chambers, and the castle's nocturnal creatures stir. Your bed is little more than a pallet on the floor, but tonight it feels like a luxury. Just before you settle, a sharp knock at the door breaks the relative quiet. A guard pokes his head in, whispering that the Lord needs extra help checking the armory. You groan internally. Another walk up those treacherous spiral stairs. The armory is both fascinating and intimidating. Walls lined with weapons, swords, pikes, crossbows, and suits of armor that gleam dully in the torchlight. You're reminded that this castle is built for war as much as survival. The air smells of oiled metal and aged leather. As you and the guard inspect racks and doors, you hear a sudden clang. A chain falls, and a helmet rolls across the floor with an eerie echo. Your heart leaps, but the guard chuckles. "Just the ghost of old Sir Robert," he says with a wink. Local legend claims the spirit haunts the armory, protecting the castle from traitors. Historians still argue whether these ghost stories were meant to intimidate or entertain, probably a bit of both. On your way back, you pass the chapel, where a lone monk chants softly. His voice is soothing, a balm to the cold stone corridors. Religion permeates everything here, from rituals to superstitions, and you find yourself clinging to any small comfort it offers. Back in your room, you lie awake, the fire's glow fading. The castle feels alive around you, snoring in distant chambers, the creak of settling walls, the faint drip of water somewhere deep below. You close your eyes, knowing that tomorrow will bring the same relentless routine, the same sharp edges of cold and exhaustion. But for now you rest, tucked beneath your threadbare blanket, the castle's heartbeat steady beneath you. Surviving another night here? Honestly, it's still a mystery. You wake to a murmur, barely louder than the wind slipping through the arrow slits. The castle is stirring before dawn, a low hum of footsteps and whispered commands. You blink against the gray light, already feeling the cold seep back into your bones. Today, your task is to assist in the kitchen garden, a small patch of earth just beyond the outer walls, where herbs and vegetables grow, barely thriving in the thin medieval soil. The castle's food supply depends heavily on this patch, especially when winter stores run low. You trudge through the muddy courtyard, eyes on the frost-glazed ground. The smell of damp earth and rotting leaves is pungent but oddly comforting. You join a small group of gardeners armed with spades and baskets. This tiny garden is a lifeline, a green speck of hope amid all the gray stone and cold. You pull up withered carrots and sniff at sprigs of thyme. Some herbs are prized not just for cooking, but for medicine, too. You pick a handful of lavender, hoping it'll help with the relentless chill. There's a quirky story you overheard from one of the herbalists. Medieval gardeners believed that planting garlic near the walls could ward off evil spirits. And apparently, the garlic does a decent job keeping some pests away, too. You smile, wondering if the ghosts are scared of garlic or just hungry. While working, you hear the clatter of hooves and the shouted orders of knights preparing to depart on a patrol beyond the forest. The captain calls out, "Keep your eyes sharp." Bandits have been reported near the old mill. You watch as armored men mount horses, their breath misting in the cold morning air. Historians still argue whether these bandit stories were exaggerated to justify increased castle defenses, or if they reflected genuine dangers faced by rural communities. Either way, the threat feels real enough. You finish your work and carry a basket of fresh greens back inside. The cook is already preparing broth, and the smell promises a rare treat after days of heavy stew. Later, you head to the blacksmith's forge to deliver the basket. The forge is a world apart, hot, noisy, and filled with sparks flying like tiny stars. The smith pounds a glowing horseshoe on the anvil, sweat streaming down his soot-smudged face. You watch, fascinated, as metal bends and shapes under his hammer. Blacksmithing was one of the most dangerous and vital jobs in the castle. Without the smith, weapons rusted, horses went unshod, and repairs stalled. The castle's very survival depended on his skill. You recall a strange fact. Some medieval blacksmiths believed their work had magical properties, especially when forging weapons under certain moon phases. This belief often mixed with Christian prayers and old folk superstitions. Historians still debate how much these ideas influenced actual smithing practices. By afternoon, the castle feels busier. Traders arrive, animals are fed, children play cautiously near the stables. You catch a moment to visit the castle's well, where water is drawn with a heavy bucket. You notice tiny cracks in the stonework, a reminder that even mighty castles need constant upkeep. The steward, a stern but fair man, reminds everyone to report any damages quickly. "Stone doesn't fix itself," he says gruffly. You nod, knowing this castle is a fragile fortress held together by countless small acts of care. As the sun sets, you join others around the fire again. The day's fatigue settles in your limbs. You realize surviving medieval castle nights isn't just about enduring the cold or danger. It's about the constant, exhausting effort to maintain every inch of this stone beast. You finally crawl into your pallet, the thin blanket a poor but precious shield against the night. The castle breathes around you, creaking walls, whispering winds, and the ever-present hum of watchful eyes. And once more, you drift into uneasy sleep. Another night survived, but the mystery far from solved. You awake to the sharp clang of the morning bell echoing through the stone corridors. The castle stirs again, its ancient bones creaking and settling under the weight of another day. You're cold, tired, and maybe just a bit resigned, but still here. Today, you're assigned to firewood duty, which sounds straightforward until you realize that duty means hiking down to the forest, chopping, hauling, and stacking enough wood to keep every hearth in the castle blazing for the coming days. This job is a brutal reminder that medieval life didn't just rely on stone walls, it depended on endless manual labor. You step outside, the chill air biting at your cheeks. The forest looms, dense and shadowy, smelling of pine, moss, and damp earth. You grab an axe, heavy and awkward in your hands, and follow the woodcutters deeper into the trees. Splitting logs is hard work, each swing demanding more strength than you think you have. Your muscles ache almost immediately. A sharp crack splits the air as a log gives way, wood fibers snapping apart. The forest echoes with the sound of axes and grunts. You pause to catch your breath and spot a curious sight. A squirrel darting up a tree, clutching a pine cone almost as big as its head. Medieval people often believed animals were tiny messengers of the forest spirits, sometimes guiding or warning humans. Some woodsmen even left offerings to keep the forest gods appeased. Historians still argue how deeply these pagan beliefs influenced everyday castle life, despite the spread of Christianity. As you gather wood, your mind wanders to the castle's heating, or lack thereof. Stone walls are great for defense, but terrible for warmth. Fireplaces were few and far between, mostly reserved for the lord's chambers. The rest of the castle relied on small hearths and the collective heat of bodies packed tightly in drafty rooms. Back at the courtyard, you stack logs into neat piles. The firewood must last through the harsh winter, and miscalculating the amount could mean frozen toes and miserable nights. A fellow laborer jokes about the castle sauna, a mysterious place rumored to exist beneath the keep, where the Lord's family supposedly bathed in hot steam. The truth? Historians still argue whether such saunas were real or just tall tales told to impress visitors. You shrug off the chill and head to the kitchen to deliver some of the wood. The cook thanks you with a tired smile, already stoking the fire for tonight's meal. By evening, your hands are blistered, your clothes smeared with dirt and sap. You collapse near the hearth, watching sparks rise like tiny stars. Surviving nights in a medieval castle means enduring days like this. Grueling, monotonous, and unglamorous. But it also means belonging to something bigger than yourself, a fortress of stone, sweat, and stubborn will. As you drift to sleep, the fire's glow fades and the cold creeps back in, but you're ready to face another day. Somehow. The night deepens, but your work doesn't end. Tonight you're part of the castle watch, the tired but vital duty of guarding the walls. The cold nips through your threadbare cloak, and the wind howls like a restless beast as you trudge the battlements. The stones beneath your boots are slick with frost, and every shadow seems to hide unseen threats. You grip your spear tighter, squinting into the darkness. The castle's defenses rely heavily on these endless rounds, the eyes and ears of a fortress that never truly sleeps. You pass the torch to your companion, whose breath puffs clouds in the chill air. You trade whispered jokes to keep spirits up, the usual banter about how rats are probably the real rulers of the castle. He laughs softly, but both of you know the truth hides in the quiet. Guards have to be alert for any signs of attack. Thieves, enemy soldiers, or worse, spies hiding among the shadows. The walls are your lifeline, but they're also a cage. You've heard stories of guards who lost their minds in the monotony, haunted by shadows and whispers. One of the strangest parts of this duty is the signal system. Bonfires, horns, and flags communicate warnings across miles. The idea of a medieval internet of smoke and sound is fascinating, but fragile. Historians still argue how efficient and reliable these methods truly were. Could a single bonfire really rally a full army before dawn? The evidence is mixed. Tonight, you spot movement near the outer gate, a stray dog maybe, or a shadow of the forest. Your heart quickens, but it turns out to be nothing. Still, your hands don't loosen their grip. You remember the time when the castle tried a watchdog patrol. Real dogs trained to bark alarms. The concept sounds brilliant, but the dogs often ran off chasing squirrels or simply refused to obey. The medieval mind was filled with creative, if not always practical solutions. As you finish your watch, your legs ache, your eyes burn, and the cold gnaws relentlessly. You retreat to the warmth of the hall, where a few servants quietly sip watered wine and share stories to keep the fear at bay. The castle feels alive tonight, breathing, watching, waiting. You slip into your pallet with a mix of relief and dread. Tomorrow will bring another set of challenges, but for now, you close your eyes and dream of a softer life, somewhere beyond these stone walls. The morning sun filters weakly through grimy windows, casting a pale glow over the castle's cramped quarters. You're jolted awake by the clatter of breakfast preparations, scraping pots, whispered chatter, and the distant crowing of a rooster somewhere beyond the outer wall. Today, your task is a strangely vital one, cleaning the castle's rushes. Now, if you're picturing elegant rugs, think again. The floors were covered with layers of rushes, fresh-cut reeds or straw, laid down to absorb filth and soften the cold stone beneath. They were replaced regularly, which meant a lot of dirty, smelly labor. You drag yourself through the corridors, basket in hand, gathering old rushes to be burned or composted outside. The smell is a pungent mix of sweat, animal fur, and, well, you don't want to think too hard about what else. Cleaning rushes might seem like a lowly task, but it was crucial for hygiene. Medieval castles had no indoor plumbing. Waste and mud tracked in daily meant these rushes acted like primitive floor mats, and sometimes a source of embarrassment when the steward inspected. You recall a quirky bit of trivia. Some castles kept stink pits, areas where waste was dumped away from the main buildings to reduce smell. Despite this, odors were a constant battle. Historians still argue how effective medieval sanitation truly was, given the prevalence of diseases and parasites. As you carry old rushes out to the burn pile, you pass the servants' quarters where whispers tell of a mysterious illness spreading in a nearby village. No one knows exactly what it is, but fear settles like a heavy fog. The castle feels suddenly smaller and more fragile. Returning inside, you notice a small mouse darting under a table. It's so bold it almost seems to challenge you. You remember the old cat, Lord Whiskers, who kept the rodent population somewhat in check, an unofficial hero of castle life. By midday, your hands are sore, your nose raw from the dust and smoke. But the rushes are replaced, and the floors look almost respectable again. Later, you catch the Lord Steward pacing the great hall, reviewing ledgers and orders with a furrowed brow. You overhear mention of repairs needed on the drawbridge and a shipment of new arrows. Life inside the castle is a constant balancing act between defense, comfort, and survival. As evening descends, the castle quiets. You settle down, thoughts drifting to the mysteries of daily life here. How did people really survive nights like this, in stone walls that kept out enemies but trapped cold and fear? The answer is complicated, a tangle of sweat, hope, faith, and sheer stubbornness. And somehow you're part of that story. The chill of early morning still lingers as you join the group tasked with maintaining the castle's latrines. Yes, those medieval royal conveniences you never really want to think about too closely. They're usually just holes over the moat or deep pits designed to whisk away waste. But managing them was a whole other nightmare. You trudge to the small tower where the garderobe, a privy built into the wall, juts out over the river below. You grimace as the faint stench hits your nostrils, a pungent reminder of the castle's less glamorous side. Despite their crude design, these latrines were a critical part of medieval sanitation, albeit imperfect. You and a couple of other servants clean out the refuse buckets, carefully carting the waste away for dumping far from the living quarters. This job smells as bad as you feared, but feels strangely important. Without proper waste removal, the risk of disease skyrockets. A quirky fact you recall: some castles tried using crocodile dung as a deodorizer and disinfectant in latrines. Medieval hygiene practices weren't exactly what you'd call refined. Historians still debate how widespread or effective these odd treatments really were, or whether they were just desperate experiments. While you work, a rumor circulates about a recent outbreak of castle fever, likely typhoid or dysentery, sweeping through nearby strongholds. The idea of disease lurking in every shadow makes the castle feel more like a prison than a fortress. Back inside, you wash your hands in cold water from a basin. Medieval plumbing was practically non-existent, so clean water was always a luxury. You glance at the stone walls, thinking how they trap not just invaders, but all the smells, cold drafts, and unseen microbes. Later, you find a quiet corner in the chapel, where the soft chants of monks rise like a balm. Religion wasn't just a spiritual refuge. It was also believed to protect against illness and evil spirits. Many castles had a resident healer who combined folk remedies with prayers, blurring lines between science and superstition. As the day wears on, You feel the heavy weight of responsibility that falls on even the lowliest tasks. Keeping the castle's latrines clean might not seem heroic, but it's vital for everyone's survival. Without these small acts of care, the fortress would collapse from within. That night, as you settle into your pallet, you breathe a little easier. The castle's defenses aren't just walls and weapons. They're the unglamorous rituals of hygiene, maintenance, and stubborn endurance. Surviving medieval castle nights? You're starting to see it's about much more than just cold stone and creaky doors. The day drags on with little reprieve. Your next task is to assist in the castle's animal care, specifically the stables where horses are fed, groomed, and sheltered. The stables are a chaotic world of straw, manure, and the occasional startled neigh. The horses here are more than just pets. They're vital for travel, battle, and communication. A well-cared-for horse could mean the difference between life and death on the battlefield, or a successful message reaching the Lord's allies. You drag buckets of water to the thirsty animals, trying not to slip on the slick, straw-strewn floor. The smell is overwhelming, a pungent mix of hay, sweat, and manure that lingers on your clothes long after you leave. A strange but true tidbit is that some medieval horse care involved weird remedies, like rubbing a mixture of onion juice and egg yolk into a horse's mane to keep it shiny. Whether it worked or just smelled awful, historians still argue the effectiveness of many of these folk treatments. As you brush down a massive war horse, you overhear a whispered conversation about a recent escape. One of the Lord's prized stallions bolted during a thunderstorm. Such incidents could cause chaos, especially during times of siege or battle. The castle's equine population was as temperamental as its human inhabitants. Training horses for war required skill, patience, and often a bit of luck. Later, you help muck out the stalls, a nasty but necessary chore. The waste was often used as fertilizer for the castle gardens or composted outside the walls. Despite the smell and the grime, these routines kept the castle running. You take a brief respite near the stable door, watching a few children cautiously approach to pet the horses. For a moment, the roughness of castle life softens into something almost tender. Night falls again, and you find yourself back in your quarters, your hands sore and your spirit tired but oddly content. The castle's survival wasn't just about stone walls and armed guards. It depended on these daily rituals, on people like you quietly keeping things together. As you lie down, you wonder what the future holds for this place, this fortress built of sweat and stubborn hope. Surviving these medieval castle nights might feel like a mystery, but you're learning the rules, one hard day at a time. The castle is unusually quiet this morning, the usual bustle softened under a gray sky. Your job today takes you to the armory, a cold stone chamber lined with racks of weapons and armor. Walking in, you immediately feel the chill of metal and stone pressing in. The armory is the heartbeat of the castle's defense. Here lie swords dulled by countless battles, shields scarred by arrows, and suits of armor painstakingly repaired and polished. You help the armorer inspect and clean the weapons, a meticulous task requiring sharp eyes and steady hands. You pick up a longsword, its blade chipped but still deadly. The armorer shares stories of famous sieges where weapons like this turned the tide. You listen, fascinated, as the weight of history settles around you. A quirky detail you remember. Some medieval weapons were believed to carry protective spells etched into their blades or hilts, meant to ward off curses or unlucky strikes. Historians still debate how much magic and superstition influenced the daily lives of knights and soldiers. While cleaning, you overhear whispers about a new batch of crossbows arriving soon. The crossbow was a game changer, powerful and easy to use, but feared and sometimes condemned by the church for its deadly efficiency. You help the armorer tighten straps and patch holes in leather armor. Each piece tells a story of battle, sweat, and survival. The weight of armor was immense, and wearing it meant grueling endurance, especially during long nights on guard. As afternoon fades, you carry a set of armor to the courtyard, where a knight practices drills under the watchful eyes of his squire. You notice the rhythmic clinking of metal and the fierce determination in his stance. War might be far off now, but readiness is constant. Back inside, you take a quiet moment by the hearth, the soft glow reflecting off your grime-covered hands. The armory isn't just about weapons. It's a symbol of the castle's resilience, a reminder that survival often depends on preparation as much as luck. As darkness creeps back, you settle down, the clang of swords and stories of battles echoing in your mind. Nights in the castle are long and filled with shadows, but they're also filled with the unyielding spirit of those who hold it together. Tonight you find yourself drawn to the castle kitchen, a noisy, steamy realm where the clatter of pots and the hiss of fires fill the air. It's chaotic, warm, and smells of roasting meat and herbs. A far cry from the cold stone corridors you've grown used to. The kitchen is the castle's heart in a different way, feeding dozens of people who depend on its bounty to survive long days and even longer nights. You help the cook prepare the evening meal, chopping vegetables, stirring thick stews, and hauling firewood to keep the hearth blazing. You notice the variety of spices: pepper, cinnamon, and even exotic saffron, luxuries that only the wealthiest castles could afford. They weren't just for flavor. Spices helped mask the sometimes less than fresh nature of medieval food. Historians still argue how widespread and affordable spices really were for common folk inside castles. Amid the chaos, you overhear a funny story about a noble who insisted on eating with a silver spoon to avoid poisoning, a paranoia that was surprisingly common. Sometimes the most bizarre fears mingled with real dangers. The kitchen staff joke about their medieval fast food, leftover bread soaked in broth, reheated and served again. You laugh quietly, recognizing that no matter the century, leftovers are a survival tactic. You help load large pots onto wooden tables, ready for the servants to carry into the great hall. Eating was a communal affair, but the quality and quantity of food varied widely by status. The lord's table groaned under roasted boar and fine wine, while the servants ate simpler fare. Later, you retreat to the buttery to fetch ale, the castle's popular evening drink. Ale was safer than water and vital for morale. You sip the frothy brew and feel a moment of warmth spread through your chilled limbs. As night settles, the kitchen quiets, and you head back to your quarters. You realize that surviving medieval castle nights wasn't just about shelter and defense. It was about the small comforts, the shared meals, and the simple acts of keeping the fire alive. With your belly full and body weary, you close your eyes, ready for whatever tomorrow brings. You lie awake, listening to the slow, steady sounds of the castle settling into night. The flicker of candlelight casts shadows that dance along the cold stone walls, and the distant hoot of an owl reminds you that outside these walls, the wild world never sleeps. Tonight, you think about the many unseen threads holding the castle's nights together: watchful guards, roaring hearths, busy kitchens, and tired laborers like yourself. Each moment, each quiet act, is a stitch in the vast tapestry of survival. The castle is more than stone and mortar. It's a living, breathing organism, flawed but enduring. The cold doesn't relent, and the darkness is thick, but inside these walls, there's a stubborn spark of life that refuses to go out. You recall the strange superstitions whispered in the halls, wards against evil spirits, charms tucked beneath pillows, and prayers muttered in the dark. Historians still argue whether these rituals truly comforted people or merely reflected their anxieties. Either way, they were part of the nightly ritual. You think of the countless souls who came before you, enduring nights far harsher and lonelier, yet somehow surviving. Their resilience humbles you, reminding you that survival was often less about grand battles and more about grit, community, and hope. As your eyelids grow heavy, you feel the rough blankets around you, the faint warmth of the fire still lingering. The night outside is long, cold, and mysterious, but here, in this stone fortress, there is a fragile peace. You drift toward sleep, the castle's heartbeat slowing with yours, shadows softening, and the cold fading to a whisper. You've learned the secret. Surviving medieval castle nights is a puzzle of endurance, faith, and the simple human will to carry on. Good night. The night winds down gently, the cold stones quieting under a blanket of darkness. You breathe out slowly, feeling the weight of the day lift as your thoughts soften like the flickering candlelight. The castle, with all its imperfections and mysteries, is still here, still standing, because of people like you who endure the long nights, the biting cold, and the endless challenges with quiet strength. Rest now. The walls will keep you safe for this night, and tomorrow is another day, another story to be lived. Sleep well, dream softly, and when morning comes, you'll be ready.